totally different shift here was I went back to Jesse, our legal assistant, and I said, how should we document and handle a manager who's been having an affair with the female team member who reports to him? And again, wanted to include this based on, in this case, New York law and applicable federal laws. So one of the very unique things that happens is the system will also ask questions, much in the same way as when you're interacting with any staff member. So has this relationship been formally reported or disclosed? Uh, are there any documented complaints, etc.? This is where that depth, more information in, is giving you better answers. So what it did first was created a legal risk assessment and an action plan. So it starts to really get into primary legal risks, liability exposure, business risks, immediate actions required, outlining documentation and investigation, policy review and implementation, remediation steps, and then gets into different terms, what to do in the medium term. So conduct mandatory training for sexual harassment prevention, etc. And then what are protection measurements for the dealership, legal documentation risk mitigation for employees, and that includes anti-retaliation procedures, and then again, long-term recommendations. So what I then asked it to do is to go through 1, 2, and 3 in steps. So to create policy development, create an investigation protocol, and create a training program. So as it went through with this, it started to create a workplace relationship policy as a draft. Went through and started to go through what are the different disclosures, what are the different response requires, what's professional conduct requirements, etc. Then went into the investigation protocol, how to go about the initial assessment, how to go about evidence gathering, what's the interview protocol, what's the documentation template. And literally, you can copy these and create your own templates. What are the interview records and what is the information you need? What's the evidence log? And then importantly, moving to step 3, what's the training program? So, what are different training modules for workplace relationship policy, professional boundaries, harassment prevention, and training implementation in terms of delivery methods, schedule, documentation, evaluation updates, etc. So, I then asked the system create a detailed mitigation plan to add to the above. So it went through that and it created priority level 1. Well, what is that in terms of 24 to 48 hours and what are the management actions? What's the short-term controls? It created a protection measures matrix in terms of a legal protection framework. So, for instance, things like create an incident log, update the investigation file, maintain communication records from the HR director. What are the current policies? Documenting violations for legal counsel, what's happening? And then getting into employee protection measures as an example. And then also importantly, what's the remediation timeline? What do you need to do in terms of immediate response, stabilization, long-term controls? And then what is the overall monitoring? So I'm going to skip down because then what I asked it to do is to expand on the crisis management protocol and add a detailed training program for management with the session breakdown. So now it literally starts to create a crisis response framework, highlights the team activation, what are all the protocols, what's the containment phase, what's the investigation. Again, really breaking all of this down, including communication strategy, and then outlining a management training program including session 1, understanding workplace dynamics, legal framework, understanding New York State employment law, federal regulations, industry specific requirements, case law examples, etc. And what's amazing is not only does it add, for instance, the different modules, crisis management, communication, stakeholder management, it literally starts to break down different scenarios for simulation exercises to break all of this down. So jumping again down for the sake of time, I then asked it to create in detail Module 1, Session 2 with real case examples. So this is outlining legal framework. So the overview is understanding relevant employment laws, analyzing legal precedents, identifying compliance requirements, and applying legal principles to workplace scenarios. So it starts to go down into the foundation of the Civil Rights Act, the EEOC guidelines, New York State human rights law. All of these things have all been compiled without going to a lawyer first. And again, still want to review all of this with a lawyer, but think about how much time and money was just saved. And literally, it then pulled real case study analysis. And I double checked to make sure that this wasn't, made up at all, that the agent wasn't hallucinating. And it started to bring up Miller versus Department Store Corp, what happened, Thompson versus Auto Group, what happened in terms of the sales manager dated a finance department employee, the relationship ended poorly, and the manager began giving negative reviews, and the employee claimed retaliation. So, what did that mean? So, it had the full breakdown right there. And then Roberts versus Metropolitan Services. So, again, you can see how this can be utilized to help in what you don't want to be seeing in your dealership or your automotive group, but they tend to be realities.